When we think about the relationship between the mining industry and local communities, it's not always negative. Wait, I think I already see some frowning faces.
And did somebody just call me a sellout?
I've been called a sellout.
And we are talking about local communities in the US?
They thought it was something that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs did in some fairy tale.
We tend to think that a mining project starts with some big mining corporation randomly selecting some poor small town on a map, sending in troops, digging up every corner possible, and leaving behind a huge hole, and surely taking away bags of gold coins. But maybe, just maybe, this idea in our heads is a little, how should I put it, outdated. In this episode of Jobs of Tomorrow, we interviewed a panel of a communications expert, a cultural anthropologist, a behavior scientist, a mining engineer, and a current student to explore the fascinating complexities and practices of community engagement in mining projects.
People have a perception about what the mining industry looks like. We all picture pickaxes and person with a headlamp on and a dirty face coming out of a hole in the ground.
We hear about the negative examples. We hear about the large catastrophic tailings dams failures. It's rare that the media is going to pick up a story of mining contributing to local livelihoods or contributing to sustainable development in the areas where they operate, which is very much the case in many instances.
A lot of what we hear about these days, it's really in the news, is the 1872 mining law and mining law reform and trying to change that. But what's an important piece of that conversation that often gets left out is all of the environmental laws and regulations that really didn't come into play in the US until the 60s and 70s, when we saw the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, all of that stuff. So in the mining industry in the US, we see the strict environmental laws and regulations as our bare minimum.
Think about how many things have changed since 1872. In 1872, our great-great-grandfathers were driving cars like this. That is, if they even had a car. They were listening to music like this. Doing laundry like this. And the long list of electronics we have today probably wouldn't exist in their wildest imagination. In the spirit of progress and innovation, how about we also upgrade our perception of the mining industry?
But that's really not what it is now. It's an incredibly high-tech industry. We use drones and LiDAR and automation and all kinds of amazing technology. And it helps us do things more safely and more responsibly as well.
It's not easy to turn the conversation toward advancements when the topic comes up at dinner.
I got a little bit of pushback when I told my friends I was taking a job in gold mining. They all looked at me puzzled and had no idea that that even still happened. They thought it was something that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs did in some fairy tale.
I've been called a sellout. A lot of my anthropology colleagues kind of wonder what I do in the mining engineering department. It's an unprecedented position for an anthropologist. But my response to them is one, where would we be without mined materials? And I think there's sort of this spectrum of ways that we can position ourselves to make change.
Nicole first developed her interest in the gold mining industry after a field trip to Tanzania. She was impressed by how the livelihood of the locals has been largely improved by the mining industry, and how complex and fascinating the community relations around a mine can be.
one of my goals in teaching is just to complicate that narrative of the relationship between mining and communities. Most of my field work since my PhD has taken place in Latin America and Peru. We'll spend periods of time in communities. So we get to know people in the communities, we build rapport, we form relationships, and then from there we will do more systematic methodologies such as semi-structured interviews. We may do surveys, but a big part of our work is participant observations. And so our methodologies really get an in-depth understanding of communities and their engagements with mining, whether it's their impacts from mining or whether it's their actual involvement in mining as employees and workers.
The more they talked to the locals, the clearer it was that the local community is not homogeneous. Neither is their relationship with the mining company. And both the companies and researchers are fully aware of the mixed feedback.
While people we talk to might bring up a lot of the negative aspects of mining, they also bring up the positives. And I think there's often an ambivalence in terms of people recognize that it has helped them, but even then they might resist mining. So I think that what we find is that the relationships between large mining companies and communities is really complicated and very nuanced in terms of different groups even within the community. Some people might gain from employment in the mine, whereas others may not. And so that can sometimes form a divide within communities.
And the reason why we can do mining in the United States in a responsible manner is because people fought and they pushed back and they asked questions.
It takes teams of people to come up with cohesive strategies for today's mining projects.
What you see in terms of the team is this unique blend of both applied scientists, like geologists and chemists, engineers, like mining engineers, metallurgical engineers, chemical engineers, and then also finance and business people.
And there are always questions about local impact.
Same thing for ecology. Will we see large shifts in biodiversity and native populations when we either start a mining process or we close it? How can we ensure that we're not impacting a lot of ecological harm? And then when we talk about ethics, we need to consider, what are the social impacts of what we're doing? Are we putting local populations, local communities at risk with our hiring practices? Are we maintaining an appropriate level of diversity? That's really important because we have mining all over the globe. Are we making sure that people we're hiring at our mines in a specific country, is that representative of the area around us?
And all these groups have to coincide to create a cohesive solution, and one that's both profitable, technically sound, safe, environmentally responsible, and appeals and supports the local population and the local community.
Communication experts like Emily Hendrickson have observed that the whole industry has been turning those thoughts into actions.
Community relations is really all-encompassing. You could call it external engagement or external affairs. In the last few years, we've definitely seen a shift industry-wide towards ESG.
Reasons are twofold. The companies want to, and the companies also need to.
I think the U.S. population in general, and as we're seeing growing in the upcoming generation, they demand that industrial activities be done in a safe and responsible manner. And that demand is reflected through a lot of regulations and a lot of things that mines are required to do.
Our stakeholders are demanding more of us, governments are demanding more of us, and investors are demanding more as well. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an investment firm that would invest in a company that doesn't have any ESG-related initiatives. It's really becoming standard.
And the local communities have every right to demand answers and actions.
And the reason why we can do mining in the United States in a responsible manner is because people fought and they pushed back and they asked questions and they demanded more of industry and of the government in the US. So I think that diversity of thought is the most important thing, and it's what really drives us towards a better future and being a more responsible industry.
But when does the outreach start? Take the Delamar project that Emily's company has been working on for the last few years.
So Integra acquired the Delamar project in November, late 2017. And pretty much got right out on the ground engaging with stakeholders right away. Waiting until formal permitting processes when you have just a 30-day public comment period is no longer enough. It's being really informed and transparent from the start.
Who exactly is counted as part of the local community?
So a stakeholder in a really broad sense is anyone who is affected by or has the ability to affect our project. So for the Delamar project, for example, that does mean the people who geographically live in close proximity to our mine. It also includes people who recreate in the area that we're operating in. It includes the local government at the county level, the state level, federal level, media, nonprofit organizations, community health coalitions. So it's a really, really broad group of people that I interact with.
A proactive attitude and transparent communication style absolutely matter. But at the end of the day, the most persuasive argument might come from what the mining project can bring to the communities. And merely writing checks wouldn't do.
Historically, what we call corporate social responsibility, which is sort of this umbrella term for community engagement, for maximizing community benefits. Historically, it was very much philanthropy, where I think the idea was we'll build hospitals, we'll build schools, we'll give the community money, and we'll gain social acceptance. And I think over the years, the industry has found that that's not super effective, and that really where social responsibility lies in addressing the impacts of their operations. With the development of the UN Sustainable Development Goals in 2012, it's really about how can companies contribute to sustainable development in and around the communities where they operate. Really thinking about how can social responsibility extend past the life of the mine.
From exploration, development, permitting, into production, operation, and then closure. The lifespan of a mine might be a few decades across generations. So the project teams are also innovating and improving the give-back programs to communities.
And then on the community investment side, it's not a transactional relationship with stakeholders. We're no longer just writing a check and having our picture on the front page of the newspaper. It's what are the community-based outcomes associated with this program? On the social side, the mining industry has definitely been the cause of boom-bust cycles in towns. A mine comes in and develops and brings a lot of economic prosperity to a community. And then when that mine closes, you leave, right? So we're looking at, from the outset of developing our project, not only on the operational side, looking at things like alternative haulage and solar panels, but also on the community side, understanding how we can come into a community, yes, bring in lots of new jobs, tax dollars, but also what's the legacy of our project? And over the life of this mine, how is this going to affect the community? How can we help the community grow in a really sustainable way? And even looking before we move any ounce of dirt out there, what does closure look like for this mine? How are we going to invest in this community over the long term to be able to support it even after the mine does close?
Sometimes it's something more tangible that slips under the radar because we've never lived without them. For example, electric power or clean water.
I think this generation of students I feel like they're much more open-minded, and they come into the classroom with a more holistic perspective.
There is a higher emphasis on not only returning the land back to how it was before we touched it, but improving on it.
Silver City, Idaho is also really close in proximity to us, and it was actually the first town in Idaho to get electric power because of the historic mining activity that took place there.
There is a higher emphasis on not only returning the land back to how it was before we touched it, but improving on it. So making sure that we are leaving that area with clean drinking water. A lot of times when we're mining metals, the area previously does not have clean drinking water because of heavy metals from the ore body itself leaching into the water table. Pretty common trend we see, especially in southern Arizona. But when we mine, we have the ability to remove the bulk of those metals that can easily enter the water table and drinking water supply for a lot of rural Arizonan towns. So in a lot of ways, we as the mining industry have a lot of potential to leave the local environment much better than it was before for humans and wildlife.
Emily's team has thought through the legacy they want to leave behind for the residents in the Delamar project in southwestern Idaho one day.
We recently completed our pre-feasibility study for our project. And one of the things we were looking at is sustainability trade-off studies. So we were working with a third-party consulting firm to look at things like energy, haulage, things like that, and understand not only the sustainability, energy use, reduced water use components of those practices, like solar power on our grid or an electric rail conveyor system in place of your traditional haul truck. What we saw too was that there are economic benefits to be had over the life of the project. It might be a little bit more of a capital investment up front, sustainability initiatives like that, but over the life of the project, it actually saves money. So you're doing right by the environment, you're doing right by communities, you're taking into account all these different perspectives, and you're doing what's right for the business and for shareholders as well.
That sounds fascinating to me, but not to everyone who first hears about it.
And when it comes to negative stakeholders, that you're absolutely bound to encounter those. A negative interaction is more valuable to me because we can have positive outcomes with people that are maybe oppositional towards us. People get emotional or they get passionate about things that they care about. You can yell at me, I'm tough, I can take it. And being able to listen, understand, and meet them where they're at and provide them with the information that I would provide anyone else with. They can come and tour our project and they will get the same message that everyone else gets, because you don't tailor your message to kind of spin things or make it sound good to one person or things like that. And so it's being really consistent in your messaging and just being open.
But what do jobs at a mining site look like? The question haunting everyone is it safe? Behavioral scientist Dr. Emily Haas has studied over 2,700 mine workers at 40 sites to answer that question. Her cooperative behavioral engineering research to practice interventions have helped operations identify and reduce safety and health risks to better protect thousands of workers.
So it's really important for that safety culture to be really established and supported on site, because again, that will trickle into the community. When we go to these operations, you talk to so many people who have been working in the mining industry for decades, and it's really nice to hear that the industry is a lot safer than it was, 50 years ago, and you would hope that it is, but just to hear workers reflect on the changes that have been made in terms of the PPE that they wear on the job and the different technologies that have been introduced. That's, there have been a lot of changes that have just supported and shown that the industry cares about the health and safety of their workers.
Like Dr. Haas, young minds like Kate Willa Brown Requist are also attracted to the challenge of how to mitigate workplace safety hazards. Kate's research focuses on human health and safety, and the results can be critical in both emergency or daily operation.
Large part of my focus is on mine rescue and mine escape, but also environmental air quality in working environments. So we want to make sure that whatever we're exposing human beings to, we can track that level of exposure. That's really important.
It's hard not to be impressed by the ideas, practices, and solutions that Emily, Dr. Haas, Nicole, and Kate have shared. But what kinds of jobs could fit into this spectrum of ways in which young people can position themselves to make changes? What can they expect? With their communicative skills and engineering backgrounds, why should they choose this industry in particular?
my cell phone and my laptop, two tools that I use every single day. Knowing just the sheer volume of minerals that go into those pieces of technology, that was a really big selling point.
It's also about being part of the solution.
I thought that there were, legitimate, extensive drawbacks to the mining process. There is still ecological harm that occurs. We're working to reduce that.
Kate's care for the environment is shared by both her and the upcoming generation in the industry.
One of the more innovative ones I've seen as a reclamation plan was that they were going to convert their underground mine into a bat cave. And while this seems a little bit esoteric, it was actually based on an assessment they did where the bat in that area were becoming endangered. So they were going to push the mine as a bat cave to help grow the bat population, which obviously helps with rodents and other things like that. So I thought that was a very creative solution that some students came up with.
In case you were wondering, the group got an A.
This generation of students I feel like they're much more open-minded, and they come into the classroom with a more holistic perspective of how environment and social and technical aspects of any kind of development are related. They value the environment, they value topics related to human rights, and they really want to do the right thing. For example, can truck traffic be rerouted to better address community concerns about noise and traffic and dust? Are there simple tweaks in sort of the mine design that can address community concerns? So I think that those are some things that it really takes these interdisciplinary teams to start thinking about. So social scientists and engineers and the business folks at a company to really be putting together these ideas and engaging with communities in these sort of co-creation activities.
And being a PhD or an engineer is not the only way to join the industry.
I entered the industry with an associate's degree in science, and then the first company I worked for in mining actually helped me to complete my bachelor's degree in communications. And so I did that online while working full-time. I always say, I absolutely identify as an environmentalist, and I want people who hate the way mining is done or who don't agree with the industry to come and work with me and be part of the solution, provide their input, because if you don't ask those questions or have those conversations, you don't open yourself up to different perspectives and actually get better.
Tomorrow's mining experts are going to be liaisons with scientists, environmentalists, anthropologists, politicians, and even just the residents living nearby. It's a delicate balance, but I think we're up to the task. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Kristen Morant, and we'll see you on the next episode as we explore the jobs of tomorrow.